My name is Pau, short for Paulina, and even though I'm a born Krakowian, today I'm hailing all the way from London Tech City on the Ryanair flight, bless me, to tell you a little bit about what's currently happening on the London scene, for those who are curious, focusing specifically on things that are of interest to me, which is company culture. I believe that there is a certain company culture revolution going on in the startup world, and the startup world being a certain laboratory for social change, it's something that we can probably begin to see in the workplace in general quite soon. Why should you listen to me? First of all, because I'm the only person in this conference who's got 2 slides with a fuzzy blue monster in it, and it's adorable, so please pay attention. Secondly, because I believe that my company, GrantTree, that I started 3.5 years ago in London, is one of the few globally that are actively implementing the principles of open company culture. And I would like to tell you a little bit about our journey, as well as hopefully start a debate about whether the current generation of startups, so you folks, the people in London, the people in San Fran, the way we run our companies can have a massive impact in how companies are going to be run in the future in general. Cool. Let's run with it then. The city, by far the largest contributor to the UK economy, tech city, 3rd largest tech cluster in the world after San Fran and New York, but most of the people in it, let's face it, make very little money, if any at all. These two, as we speak, are actively competing for talented workflows at the moment. Why is it so? Well, I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about certain trends I've spotted, which I think contributed to the tech city growing in power. That's us here. We're quite close to the kind of border, even though it's obviously not designated, which means that if you walk a little bit towards central London, like a few hundred meters, you find yourself in a suit territory, which is quite interesting. These guys are some of my favorite clients that we deal with, like Stack Exchange. I don't actually deal with Mind Candy yet. I need to work on that one. So what has happened in the tech city throughout the last few years? Firstly, I think that based on data and based on what I've seen, the seed funding gap is closing. Why is that? Well, through the introduction of certain tax schemes such as SEIS, boring as it sounds, Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, it has made a huge difference to what kind of individuals and what kind of institutions are prepared to put their money into early stage companies. Secondly, as we all know, Europe has been deprived of exits and success stories in the startup world. Right now, the rumor has it, even I saw an article in Financial Times quite recently, that there are as many as 10 companies in the UK actually considering IPO in the near future. As you will know, justeat.co.uk, a slightly rubbish takeaway delivery app, has IPO'd. Zoopla, the property giant, has announced future plans for IPO in near future at valuation of over £1.2 billion. And thirdly, all this is kind of whetting the appetite of investors in scaling companies and VCs. In the last quarter, only in the last quarter, £500 million has been invested in UK companies in general. And that doesn't even include the $25 million that TransferWise got 2 days ago in a round led by Richard Branson. So that's just a few things that have contributed to the tech city growing in power. And there are a few telltale signs that there is actually this recruitment battle going on between those two. I'll just give you one example. As GrantTree, we are a business that gets equity-free government funding in the form of grants for technology companies. We work with these guys, but also with people who are not technology-driven, but are underpinned by a technology platform. One of those clients is a startup called Escape the City. Now, these guys are an absolutely booming job board for city workers, disillusioned mostly city workers, that are now looking for work that doesn't only feed their pockets, but perhaps feeds their emotions and maybe even their souls. And that's where we're hitting on something that really interests me and that I'm really passionate about. Startups don't just innovate in one way or two ways. Innovation is not just about the commercial aspect of it, disruption of markets. It's not just about the technology aspect of it, product development, but it's also about how we organize ourselves in our startup companies, how we actually get things done. And arguably, that could have an even bigger social impact than the innovation that's going on in the commercial and technology space. And the time comes to tell you a little story of someone, myself, who has started a company, let's face it, a relatively boring company, and has built it in a relatively interesting way. We're not very sexy. We don't change the dynamics in the market that we operate in. We don't redefine those markets. We merely get some government funding for very interesting people out there. We help them a little bit. We help their projects. But it's not, we don't have a claim to fame, like Go Cardless, for example. However, when it comes to the way that we organize ourselves, that we get things done, there's a certain interesting story that I think it's worth telling. To give you a little bit of background, oh no, that's, okay, right, okay, that comes first. So I'll explain that slide first. It's actually a really good slide. The story is called The Old, the New, and the Scary. Why is it called that? Well, what happened in the last 3.5 years of the existence of my company, we looked at different ways in which people have managed companies and are managing companies at the moment to figure out what is right for us and what kind of company we really want to build. So what I mean by the old is people like Taylor and Ford's factories, and Gantt. You guys know Gantt charts, although most of you are agile, so you don't really. But this is the old. The new is perhaps more like Zappos, or perhaps more like Valve software. So the type of company management structure where people dare to do things that perhaps haven't been done before in this shape or form. And the scary is the stuff that you can read about in a book I really, really highly recommend called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. It's about a manufacturing company in Brazil, which he restructured in the 80s and which is a completely open company. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means later. A bit of background about where we are. So we started 3.5 years ago. We're proud that since then we have raised over 11 million worth of government funding for our clients. That's a point of pride for us. And given that we've never raised equity investment and we are a purely service-driven company, which means obviously has got limited scalability, I think those are relatively good figures. Anyway, 3.5 years ago, the only thing that my co-founder Daniel and I had back then was, well, 3 things, really. The first of them was a sense of a certain opportunity, and that was to do with the lack of knowledge about government funding on the scene and the fact that people aren't really looking enough at alternative ways of financing their business. The second thing we had was the knowledge that between the two of us, we had the right skills to bring that opportunity to life, to make it happen. And the third thing was the slightly arrogant belief that we probably could do it better than many other people out there. And I suspect that at least some of you guys here are in this very space. And if that's where you are, I really urge you and beg you to hang on in there, put in the hours, put in the sleepless nights, etc., and make it work, because it's really worth it in the end. Anyway, enough pep talk. 6 months into the existence of the business, you could say, validated our business model. You could say that, according to the lean startup methodology, even though we're not really a tech company. 8 months into it, the money started coming in. Great, we could start paying off our debts. And 18 months into it, we were ready, or so my co-founder thought, to take a first person on board. I was absolutely terrified. I came up with lists and lists of reasons why it was an absolutely terrible idea to take someone on. So obviously we'd lose control. We wouldn't know what that person would be doing with our hard-earned clients. We would dilute our profits. I was absolutely out of my comfort zone, looking back, because my comfort zone used to be managing myself and my time, but not managing other people. And I'm quite glad, looking back, that Daniel dragged me out of that comfort zone of mine, kicking and screaming. Amar joined, who is now director of a company. Surprisingly, things went well. And I remember that particular meeting where we sat down and we said to each other, it's interesting, really, because, you know, we're free, writing out things, we're putting in the hours, things are happening, but it feels like we're a little bit kind of every one of us in their own world, in their own world. So we're not looking enough about how to unify our thinking, how to all be on the same page, so our efforts can multiply each other as opposed to pulling in different directions. And we sat down and we thought, okay, well, guys, we need some kind of strategy, right? So let's reach out to people who are supposed to know about this. And that's how we ended up in a very posh private members club in central London with an advisor, a strategy advisor. And that's when he told us about the old. Now, it's not about my a lack of appreciation of older people, not at all. It's just a certain comment on old company management methodologies, some of which are perhaps not entirely suited to the startup world today. Anyway, what happened back then? We learned about org charts. Some of you may even not know what they are. They're those things where you have essentially a picture of a CEO at the top, and then you've got like legs going down, then you've got like vice presidents, and then you've got legs going down from there, and it's like who controls who, where the communication lines are supposed to flow, even though they never really flow in that way. We learned about tasks, metrics, how to keep people in control, how to make sure that they're kind of scared enough to do their job well, and we thought, okay, well, we don't really like the sound of it, but it sounds like that's the price for building a scalable company. So we're just going to accept that and take that on board. And off we went, back to our rented tiny little office. We started employing more people. We started telling them, okay, you're underneath that person, and those are your monthly tasks. If you we give you a tick at the end of the month if you fulfill all those tasks, and if you get 3 ticks, you might get a pay rise, etc., etc. And everything was fine, except it wasn't really. So in our entrepreneurial heart of hearts, we felt that, well, hang on a minute. At the outset, one of the reasons why we started this company was to avoid working in a workplace like this. But we didn't know better back at the time. And I think we needed some wake-up calls to gather up the courage to do something different. And I remember those wake-up calls. The first one was my dinner with a friend called Laurie. Laurie works for a really well-off Ruby shop in London called New Bamboo. And I remember over my carry, I asked him, Laurie, so, you know, I had this strategy session and I'm about to implement those reporting lines. Can you tell me about reporting lines in your company and how they work and how you get things done? And he's like, what we do at New Bamboo is we take great pains to employ really smart, responsible people, and we let them run with it. And I just thought, what? And I'm like, but man, like, you can't scale a company now. That's impossible. And he was like, well, it works. It works for us. And that was the first time when I realized, okay, maybe the whole kind of hierarchical thing is not the only way to build a company. The second wake-up call for me was all the books I was reading at the time. I mentioned Semco. The book is actually called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. It's about a company he built in Brazil in 1980s. He took it over from his father. On the first day of work, I think he was about 21 or 22, he fired 60% of senior managers because they're simply not suited to the model he wanted to implement in the company. And he proceeded to implement open financials, people setting up their own salaries, a completely open trust-based structure. So I was reading that. I was reading the Valve employee handbook, some of you may have come across on the net. So Valve Software is a company where you come in, you receive this employee handbook, and the first thing that says in it is, welcome to Valve, you have no boss. This meaning that everybody in the company is equally responsible for the strategy and for the fact that it achieves its goals. Valve have desks on wheels because if you don't think you're contributing enough to the project that you're currently on, or if you indeed think that that project may not be going anywhere, you can wheel your desk somewhere else. That's what open allocation is. And also, they have customized lifts to accommodate those customized desks on wheels so they can move the desks between the floors as well. But that's a different story. I read about Zappos. I'm a great fan of Tony Hsieh. All sorts of things like that. And that was a second wake-up call. And a third wake-up call, that was really harsh. So we used to have this team member. She was Bulgarian. Eastern Europeans for the win, absolutely, when it comes to transparency. And she comes in to this one-to-one meeting and she says, you know what, you give me those ticks at the end of the month if I fulfill those tasks that I've set for myself at the beginning of the month. And we say to her, yeah, that's it, isn't that great? Because, you know, you get to set up your own goals. And in that way, kind of, you control how much you've done. And she says to us, well, you know what that makes me feel like? What an interesting sound. She said, that makes me feel insulted. Silence in the room. That makes me feel insulted because if I join this company, it's because I understand what you guys are trying to achieve. I understand your vision and your purpose. And it's because I would want to do the things that I deem right for the company, whether or not you're going to give me a tick at the end of the month and maybe a pay raise in a quarter. And that was a massive wake-up call. And that's where Daniel and I decided to take a leap of faith and implement the new. Now, what do I understand by the new? The new is something that a lot of startup companies are doing already. So a culture that's based on trust and openness more than anything else. So what do I actually mean by that? What I mean, you might have heard about Generation X and Y. The first one being a type of people management where people are constantly under surveillance and they are scared into performance. Because they're being watched over. The second one is more about providing people with an environment where they can, naturally, the goodness, the talent can come out, and believing in people having that capacity, or having that natural ability to just do really good shit. And that's what we decided to do. We just said, okay, we're going to treat people like adults. And what that means is we're not going to tell them what time to come to work and what time to leave. We're not going to give them tasks or expect them to come up with tasks for themselves, because if they want to do a good job, those tasks will be there anyway. We will give them access to decision-making, so we'll make sure that they participate in discussions on important strategic issues, that they are involved in hiring and firing people. And what that really enabled us to do, I think, that really empowered people to take responsibility for their work, to have a certain sense of ownership for what's happening in the company, and that was great. So that was the first step, and we're like, this feels more like it. Okay, what more can we do? And then, let's take a few seconds to appreciate the blue monster. And then we thought, okay, time to do a little bit more. If we really want to build a trust-based, open company, time to do more. And what we did is we've always had open financials where people could see the books, they knew what everybody else was being paid, they knew what expenses were going out of the company, and we just thought, let's uncover everything that business owners normally keep hidden to protect themselves. Because when you think about it, your power as a company owner or as an employer comes from the information that you have that other people don't have. And what normally happens in corporations is that people would, if they want to kind of raise higher, they would invest their political tokens in gaining particular pieces of information that may allow them to do something and, I don't know, do something behind someone's back perhaps and do better than them. And we thought, okay, why don't we actually talk about motivations behind decisions? Why don't we talk about strategy and about our fears? Why don't we talk about legal stuff? Why don't we talk about disciplinary stuff openly? And that was definitely a step forward on that journey, a massive one, a very important one that lasted for a period of a few months last year. And there are a lot of companies out there that, like GitHub, for example, that are very proud of the fact that they have open financials. And I think this is a fantastic place to be. It's a fantastic step. But it's not all. So, right, back to the Maverick, my favorite book that I'll keep coming back to. Daniel, my co-founder, grabbed me once and he said, so, you know that copy of the Maverick that I ordered for you? Are you reading it? Yes, you're reading it. I can see that. Have you gotten to the scary bit, the really scary bit? I'm like, I don't know. Well, all the things they do are pretty scary, given that it's a manufacturing industry in Brazil in 1980s, highly regulated, surrounded by workers' unions and what have you. And he said, but did you get to the really scary bit where they set up their own salaries? And I'm like, no. And I grabbed the book, I kind of flicked the pages, and I arrived at that chapter where he slowly but surely, he arrives at a position of openness and trust in the company where committees and representatives of different groups of employees can actually sit down and discuss people's salaries. And I just thought, wow. That's more or less the reaction that I had. I thought, if somebody can do that with a company of thousands of people and can have the bollocks to do that, I have a startup of 10 that's been built to be open and transparent from the outset. Like, what's stopping us from doing this? And that was really scary. That was actually really scary because it's a great idea. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, wow, so you've got employee-determined salaries, brilliant. But when you think about, you have to have a lot of openness and trust in yourself to trust in people that they'll be able to embrace it and give up their little bit. But I tell you what happened. So we started to float the idea in one-to-ones. So Daniel and I have kind of one-to-one meetings with people, like every person in the company, every second week maybe. And we said, we're just thinking that perhaps you guys should have much more influence on what you're actually paid. But what we said to them was, perhaps you could help us with some thinking and some kind of forecasting. What do you think? And we never asked them, what do you think you should be paid? We asked them, let's say that they're in sales. See operations team there. What do you think would be a good financial model for these guys? So that it actually works for the company, really incentivized, and obviously, that works. Sales and operations team kind of, there is no conflict there. And it was amazing how people, Ricardo Semler even went to an actually stage where he employed people giving courses in accounting so people could understand the financials. Here, we employ smart people so they understand the financials. But what we started to see is that people went and did massive research, not asked for at all, and they were looking at how you can structure payments, and they really got into it. That the sense of ownership was amazing. And we asked the other team, operations team, to think what might be a good pay structure for the sales team. And then we just thought, okay, well, we probably fucked this up because naturally the sales folks are going to gather up together and they really will do their best to protect a particular payment structure that will mean that there's not enough money to keep operations incentivized, and operations will do the same. And then it came to this big meeting. We have weekly huddles where we all come together, we sit down on the floor, lie down on the floor, whatever's comfortable, and we just discuss things that are meaningful for all of us. And we said to them, guys, what we're going to do, 50% of revenues that come into this company every single quarter are going to go to pay for facilities, office, any kind of payments that we need to make every month, every quarter as a company. And the rest, you need to figure out how it's going to be divided, what's going to stay in the bonus pool that will be distributed amongst everybody in the company, and what you are going to take as salaries. And you need to figure out, you need to agree on something that will work for everyone. It's not going to be perfect because it's the first time we're doing it, but we promise you that in another quarter we'll do a quarterly review. And it was amazing. I mean, I have a little bit of goosebumps because I remember that meeting, and salespeople came with an attitude to that meeting that no matter what happens, guys, we're going to make sure that we keep our 5-year commission structure. So people in our company get commission for 5 years of the livelihood of the contract. So no matter what happens, we're keeping that because that's great and that makes us money, okay? Okay, good. And operations people had some kind of different bonus and incentive. They have a filing bonus, so on filing of a claim or a grant, on completion of job, they had so like, no matter what happens, like, we got to keep that because it's great. And then you came together, and the meeting was like very quiet and like surprisingly relaxed. And at some point, like the penny dropped, and people, like the teams, looked at each other, and they understood that if we were able to have that kind of level of trust in each other to give up a little bit, each one of us, fundamentally we'll all benefit as a company. I mean, it may sound a little bit utopian, but it was great. It was a great thing to observe for me as a company founder. And we agreed on something. Everybody gave up on something so that the whole system could work. And we got out of that meeting with employee or team-determined salaries, which was fantastic. What that did to the company, obviously the benefits are still benefits, and drawbacks and difficulties are still to be seen, because that happened at the end of last year, so it hasn't been long, 2 quarters merely. But what we're seeing is that people are really more empowered to take decisions, to take responsibility. They're more empowered to work together in their teams, because, you know, if I help my colleague close that deal, there'll be more money in the bonus pool at the end of next quarter, because obviously there's a sales cycle and everything else. So there's this kind of teamwork mentality. And expenses. That's an interesting one, because normally many companies, corporate, but also startups that are doing relatively well, I've noticed that, because as a company we see people's accounts, so I know what's going on in some startups. People usually try to get away with like more and more in terms of what they're spending, and like phone bill and this and that. And since the size of the bonus pool every quarter is obviously determined by what's come out of it before as expenses, people started kind of looking at what they're spending. They really did. And we said, okay, the worst thing to happen would be for you guys to feel prevented to spend money, on things that can help the company grow. So we said, what we want you to do is, whenever you have a specific idea that you'd like to put forward that would cost the company money, we'd like you to pitch this to the company in a huddle. So what happened a few months ago is that 2 colleagues of mine in the sales team found a really interesting third-party lead generation provider company, essentially. And they said to us, look, this is the risk of using them. This is the ROI. This is the checks that we've run on them. We are asking the company for £3,000 to be able to pay these guys an upfront fee that we need to do for a pilot project. And the company agreed. And right now we're still working with them, and we're actually doing really well in partnership. So, well, you're probably wondering what the salaries that we agreed what we actually paid people. Do go to our blog, because we actually mentioned GrantTree.co.uk/blog. My co-founder wrote a blog about this and how it all happened and what we settled down on. But that's still work in progress. It's very important to say. So we're having quarterly reviews. There are also quite a few other things that we're trying. So, for example, there are things that simply seem to be a no-brainer if we have that level of transparency. For example, peer reviews. So at the end of every quarter, everybody, we anonymously assess people, everybody else, in a form against our company values and against their role fit and role performance. And this feedback, anonymous, is then collated and released openly for everybody to be able to see what people are saying, what the issues are. I'd love to get to a position, this has never been done in a service-based company, in a process-driven company, in a position where we can implement open allocation, so what Valve has in GrantTree. So we hire someone, and we hire someone for a role, perhaps, but they are free to evolve towards any role where they feel they can contribute the most. Obviously, that's really scary stuff, because we are a process-driven company, so certain things need to be done. And what if there's suddenly no one to service this particular part of the process? It's scary, but I'd love to get there, and I believe there is a way. And what I wanted to finish on is that that's just our story, but every story of a company who's trying to achieve open company culture is different. It's not about me, it's more about you guys, and it's more about us in general. So, as I said, I truly believe that startups are a microcosm or a laboratory for social change. And what we're seeing in the startup world are the general social tendencies that simply don't have a chance to come out everywhere else, because we the people have to have the guts and have the freedom to implement them first. So, you all know Steve Pinker, the guy with Drive, the book Drive, and the really cool cartoon on YouTube. He talks about AMP. AMP stands for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And those are the things that really matter in the workplace. I think that I really can't wait to see what would happen in a world where people really are free and empowered and facilitated to give the best skills that they have to a project that they truly believe in. I think that's ultimately where we're going in terms of how we organize ourselves as human beings in our teams, be it work-related teams or not work-related teams. And that's the debate that I'd like to start, and that's something that I'd like to leave you with, really. I've been told that, so I attended this marketing webinar, and I've been told that when you give people your Twitter handle, you have to give them a value proposition as well. So as in follow me because. So follow me because I'm really good at dirty jokes, and I'm positively bonkers. That's all from me. My name is Pau. If you're ever in London, please come and see us. We are on the border of City and Tech City, and we've got a pool table in our office. Thank you.
Applause.
Oh, questions?
And now let's eat.
Nick Holden, people, not the DJ.
Hi, Paulina. So, do you ever get into a situation where you decide...
The answer is probably yes, because there are all sorts of problems, but
I'm
keep
hoping
going.
it's going to be yes.
Yeah.
Do you ever get into the situation where you decide somebody in the team is bad for the team and you want to get them to go?
When someone, sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Somebody in your team is bad for the team and you want them to leave, you want to fire them, or you...
Yeah,
and, so
and I can't.
You're running this open organization.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
How do we deal with firing people?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, so that very much depends. unfortunately, we did have to fire a few people over the last 2 years, really. And I'd say that if you're trying to run that kind of company, recruitment is one of the absolutely crucial things. So to recruit people who actually really like this deal and that level of transparency and openness, but that's on the side. How do I fire people? If it's not a disciplinary kind of action, so something where we have to protect the company, that happened once, unfortunately. And that's where it's very difficult, but there are 4 directors of the company. We treat directors normally as facilitators, so as opposed to we make the decisions. It's like we empower you to make decisions. Obviously, if they're stupid decisions or decisions that are better made by someone just to we can move quicker, we'll make them. But other than that, we let you make decisions. There, we decided to just cut those 2 people off as quickly as possible and then open up a discussion about what happened. If it's something that is, for example, that comes out in a peer review that the performance of this person is deteriorating, we've got certain tools like the one-to-one meetings where we say, okay, things are not great, or how is there anything that we've missed on our side? Is there any support that you... So we always come from the point of view, we always give them the benefit of the doubt. That, we hired them for their skills, for their talent. Maybe the setup isn't right for them. If we find out after a certain period of time, and that happened once or twice actually, that it's really not a good fit, we have a conversation about fit. And in one situation like that, very early on, we actually, through a series of conversations we had with the person, we had them arrive at the conclusion that it's not the right place for them to be, because given their skills and also the character that they have, our environment is not the perfect environment, and they decided to leave, and that was brilliant. There was one situation where one guy, where we said to him, okay, something has happened which is very damaging to the company, unfortunately, that involved you. If this happens again, our hands are tied. We really like you, and we like the way you work, but if this happens again, we just have to protect the team. It did happen again. And then we gave him a 3-month notice so that he could find another job. We gave him good references. So we had one really bad firing experience, really, and that was the disciplinary procedure. But even then, and I'm really proud of that, my co-founder actually went and talked to the person afterwards. There was some clarifications. Okay, this is what happened here, this is what happened there. And we decided to give that person, even though they're not entitled to it legally, we decided to give them a payment, a so-called payment ex gratia, to reward them for the work that they'd recently done in the company. So it's very important for us what people are saying, what our ex-employees are saying, and how they're feeling about the company.
Okay, thank you.
Paul? Paul has come to my talk. I'm so happy.
I promise.
This is a round of applause for Paul.
Miss it.
Thank you, Paul. Paul is running his own conference on Monday, and he came to my talk anyway.
When your employees are setting their own salaries, do they respect the owner's profit expectations and risk tolerance?
Profit expectations and risk tolerance. So do you mean to what extent are our salaries and transparent if people are accepting that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in the 50% system, we said the other 50% that doesn't go to pay for you and for the facilities, etc. The other 50% will go to pay for taxes, to go towards company investment, and to compensate the shareholders. In a way, at the moment, we haven't been taking much money out of the company at all, so it's just kind of a level to be comfortable, financially. Have people tried to dip into this other 50%? Of course, and we would be stupid to think that they will not try. And we said to them, okay, this is the conversation that we had at the beginning. If you can prove to us that this expense is a company investment and should go in the other 50%, so it's an open conversation. That's something that we're still working on. I think it works because we really take great pains for it not to feel like we are above everybody else financially, so I think that helps. But yes, people have tried to figure out, okay, is there a way to perhaps extend the 50% pool etc. So I think that's another piece of work that we need to do to make sure that everybody is happy. But at the same time, I do feel we have the right, as people who build this company and went through a lot of hardship, to protect a certain proportion of the revenues. I think that's fair.